Welcome to Bloody Good Horror, covering the best and worst of the horror genre since Halloween 2007. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello everybody and welcome to another exciting episode of Bloody Good Horror. Tonight we will be discussing Casey's staff pick of Squirm, the most country-ass movie we have ever reviewed on Bloody Good Horror.
I'm real sorry about your worms, Roger.
Oh, boy.
It weren't no big deal.
There's going to be a lot of that, folks, so buckle up. I am Eric. I am the host of Bloody Good Horror. Joining me tonight, what we think maybe a first-time trio on this show. First up, coming to you from Indiana, his name is Casey.
Yo.
Casey, I was prepared to chastise you for this staff pick, but actually, I kind of enjoyed it. We can talk about it. Next up on the show, coming to you from Chicago, Illinois. He likes to drink beer. His name is Joe.
Howdy, y'all.
How's it going, Joe?
It's going. How are you guys?
How's the worm farming business going?
Oh, man. You know, I actually did go purchase some night crawlers a couple weeks ago to do some fishing, and I can confirm that the price of worms has skyrocketed over the last 20 to 30 years.
Well, I would hope so, because it didn't seem to be working out for our fearless heroes.
How much? $300 for, like, how many worms was he talking about?
100,000.
200,000? Yeah.
It's a lot of fucking worms.
Yeah. I mean,
You could buy worms out of a vending machine now. Can you imagine if those got electrocuted and came to life?
I mean, that's market value, like, or God knows what the resale value was for him. I'm hoping there's a hefty markup.
Maybe he's just the middleman. Maybe he paid some other man $300 for his worms, and then he's gonna
God
flip.
only knows.
He's a worm flipper. He flips them for a profit.
But in defense of Joe's smartassness, because he made the claim about it was 76 and inflation and all, and I did look it up. Ran it through a calculator. It was about a $1,300 loss there.
Yeah. Well,
So, when we started discussing the show last week, we had a full house. Then suddenly Schnars was gone. We were trying to bring Jason and he couldn't make it. Sophie ended up not being able to make it. Mark, who I'm sure has the least legit excuse out of everyone, last minute was like, "Oh, we can't make it, guys. Hurt."
Yeah.
So
Cece was in and then decided to fly to Dallas to avoid us.
So instead, you're getting the Danger Boys Part 2.
Ooh, did we decide on the brigade?
The brigade.
I like the brigade.
The problem with
always bet on the brigade.
The problem with the brigade is that that's only relevant to the, I'm assuming, tiny subset of our listeners who also watch Big Brother.
Okay, by the end of this show, because there's only so much to say about Squirm, by the end of this show, we'll turn them all into Big Brother fans.
That's right.
Sure. I haven't shaved in 2 days. Could we be the Beardgade?
You haven't shaved in 2 days? And where's your...
You see that stubble right there?
No, I don't. I would love to see you with a beard, Joe.
Me either. It comes in I feel like we've had this discussion. It comes in patchy, and it just looks like I'm a reformed terrorist.
It's a very exciting time of year, you guys. Big Brother hitting its stride. Game of Thrones back in the house, which is also very exciting.
Real Housewives of OC is back.
Oh, nice.
Big. Yeah, real big.
You just interviewed some real big dude in the world of Real Housewives, didn't you, Joe?
Yeah, we had one half of the Watch What Crappens team on last week, which, for all of you that listen, which I'm sure most of you do, they're pretty well known in the Housewives podcast community.
Are they bigger than you? Like, how big are you guys, you and Evan, at this point?
We're actually doing pretty well, like, surprisingly, and that's all credit to Evan, because I do jack and shit for the show. Every once in a while, I'll ask him how we're doing. Like, I think we're getting like 3,000 to 4,000 downloads an episode.
Wow, you guys got like an Odd Couple vibe. I like it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, we kind of have a different. There's a lot of like there's not a ton of like older. How do I explain this? Younger millennial gentlemen and like or almost 40 combos out there.
That's what I'm saying. You guys, you play off each other's strengths.
Yeah, it's an interesting pair. So we do all right.
Amazing.
We do all right. Friends of the Real Housewives podcast for those of you who are interested.
Nice. We will eventually discuss the movie tonight, in case you're new to this show. But guess what? There's only 3 of us, and we got some time to fill. So tell me how you're feeling. Tell me how you're feeling about Big Brother this year, Joe.
I like this season. I think Paul and what's the one who's always wearing like the cat ears?
Alex.
Yes. I think they're the only two. Like Paul, I think is playing a really good game. Like this last episode,
Yeah.
I thought he was amazing on. Alex, I think is kind of flying under the radar, but moving things pretty well. I actually, when Cody got voted out, I was kind of sad because I felt like he at least brought something to the house.
I was just having this discussion with Casey, though. I don't like those people because I don't like those people in real life. And so, like,
those people.
I'm always waiting for the, like, loud alpha a-hole to get voted out because what I really like is when everybody else who's just kind of on the same level, when they have to start turning at each other, like that to me is when the game gets really interesting.
Yeah, I agree. But I think
I like the shit
Cody and Paul were the only two like actually moving things around. Like even now that Cody's gone, I feel like everyone's just kind of like floating around, like not really thinking.
I'm pretty
That's
into.
when you kind of we're at that moment where you're going to see everybody kind of break off into small groups and whisper to each other for a while,
And
a couple weeks.
I think this is why they don't usually do it this early, but I think this is why Big Brother is already doing like the comeback in the house competition. Like it's only been like 4 people voted out.
There's not
right?
that many people. Yeah,
that's the craziest thing. We're only in like the 3rd or 4th
Well,
week.
last night they had a whole segment about how she was thinking about voting Mark out, and I turned to my wife and I'm like, why would you vote Mark out? He's literally dumber than a bag of rocks. He's like literally the dumbest bastard I've ever seen in real life.
I mean, I think Paul has said it a couple of weeks because he's not wanting to like push things around because he's, the vet and people will go after him. But like, they're just voting out like obvious people, with the exception of Cody, who was all Paul's move.
Yeah.
Like, at least Cody was like trying to make a big move. And he's insane to watch. Like that episode where he was going into Paul's room and they just kept kind of like focusing on his face and playing like that horror music. Like that was genius.
Just stares. I've met people like that in real life who like they just stonewall you and then you just get nervous and start babbling.
Yeah, he is terrifying.
Yeah.
Even when like Julie told him that there was a chance he could get back in the house, he did not even like grimace. Like he did.
He's stonewalled Julie.
Yeah.
It was amazing. Man is terrifying.
Christian Bale in American Psycho, basically.
Yeah,
But like to the point Joe was making, Alex got head of household, and so you knew that she was going to put Jesse up, but then she was even talking. It's like, well, if I'm going to make a move, it kind of sounded like maybe she's thinking she needs to make a move, separate herself from Paul, get her own game going. Had my hopes up, but now it sounds like she's just going for a run of the mill.
I don't know. I think her and Paul together will be an interesting duo. Like I think they could do some real damage.
Oh yeah, I think they'll run the house.
Now, Joe, you don't watch Game of Thrones, right?
I do not. I have nothing against it. I just fell off after season 3 because I would watch it and not know what the hell was going on. So I just.
Yeah, I will say it takes a lot of like extracurricular reading if you like really want to understand what's happening, and I enjoy that part. So that's kind of why I like it.
Yeah, I get it.
And Casey, you're behind.
Yes, I'm a season behind. I haven't started season 6 yet.
I just thought it was funny you mentioned pre-show the Ed Sheeran thing.
Yeah,
about
I posted on Facebook the other night because I saw Monday morning. You couldn't avoid it. That Ed Sheeran had a cameo in the opening premiere of Game of Thrones because that's everybody on Facebook was posting it.
It was fine.
Yeah.
I think what was weird about it is it was just distracting. Like that world is so immersive and well drawn out, and then suddenly his big dumbass looking face is on the screen. You're like, what is that?
Well, you could make the argument that show is so popular that they don't need to do anything like drop big name cameos in there to pull people in.
Yeah,
and surprise people.
It reminds me when
although to
the
be
prequels
fair,
were coming out for Star Wars.
Yeah.
And In Sync was supposed to be. What was the second one? Not the Phantom Menace. The one that came out after that.
Attack of the Clones.
Yes, yeah. In Sync was supposed to be in that, and at a certain point, I think George Lucas said, like, you know what, that's a really bad idea. I feel like this.
That would have been amazing.
Yeah.
Right, you guys.
But it was supposed to be like the same thing, like a stupid cameo where they probably sing like 30 seconds of a song. And
he was singing. He was singing. They're like one of the characters is like riding through the woods on her horse, and she hears a song, and then they come upon this group of soldiers, and Ed Sheeran is singing, and that was maybe the part that really annoyed me. Whatever, it was fine. Game of Thrones is fucking awesome, and right now I was just saying to Casey, like Big Brother is back, Game of Thrones is back. and I'm just like super excited about TV right now, which I can't always say.
Yeah, it's kind of in between right now. I'm always big on Big Brother, but then the middle of the summer for me is usually falls off TV wise.
Because I don't know about you guys. I get like super stressed when my DVR is getting full, so I love this time of year where you can just like clean house.
I don't have a DVR.
Oh, it's a wide awake nightmare.
I only stream stuff, so I don't really like need one, I guess.
Yeah, we still DVR.
That's a fair point, though.
I get CBS Sunday Morning on there, and then some gardening shows that I watch.
You know what, Joe? I love CBS Sunday Morning.
It's the best.
It's like the one of the few times like left on Earth where I can watch news and it's not political at all. And if it is, it's in a very lighthearted way. But they just tell these great stories, and man,
yeah, it's great.
I don't know if that makes me old, but I love it.
I've tapered off a bit. Like I still DVR, but I don't watch every episode now that Charles Osgood is gone.
Yeah, and they're long too.
Yeah. So sometimes I'll just kind of skip through the stuff I want to see, but
Jane Pauley's cool. Reminds me of Nickelodeon back in the day.
Oh yeah, I think she's very good. I think I love in the beginning where they tell like all these sort of like what's coming up in these feel good stories.
Yeah.
And then they do like a minute and a half of like news in the world right now, and it's just like bombing, people dead, everyone's dying. Here's a story about some quilters in the Midwest though.
You know what's the other thing? I've actually discovered a couple of bands on that show. They pluck some like really interesting acts that I haven't heard of. So it's kind of cool.
Yeah. I love CBS. It's very relaxing. Like I feel nice after it. Like I agree. Like it's news without like, feeling like the world is completely going to shit.
Yeah, it's delightful.
60 Minutes it varies more in that quality.
Yeah.
But they get some good stories that are don't apply to anything. With shitty politicians or wars or anything like that, people dying. So sometimes it's interesting.
There's usually at least like one story of like a man with his heart born like on the outside of him feeding the homeless. That just like makes you bawl like uncontrollably.
Feeding the homeless.
Yeah, it's feel good TV.
So now we lost half our audience. We should mention that we were gonna do War for Planet of the Apes this week, but we couldn't. Like it was a weird traveling week for a lot of us. We couldn't make it out to the theater, so we're gonna do it this coming week. So don't worry, it's still on its way.
We're not gonna miss it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that we'll make Wish Upon.
Yeah.
It came out too, but we might.
I think the trouble is going to be if it's still in the theaters by the time we can get out.
Yeah.
But maybe on the DVDs.
Yeah. Hey, Joe.
Yes, sir.
What are we drinking tonight while we review Squirm?
No music.
Oh, God. Sorry.
Just giving up.
Holy shit. Totally forgot.
Beer guts.
The music couldn't also make it tonight. He called in sick.
Sorry, Joe.
Squirm, a fine little flick about a big New York City man traveling down south to Georgia, right? Is that where he goes?
Sure.
Some fictional town of Fly Creek. Pretty much, apparently is a big tourist industry of antiquing and fishing. Because they got a worm farm and then 300 antique shop owners. So in honor of the fine sport of fishing, I picked a beer from the good folks at Arcadia Brewing Company up in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And this is their Angler's Ale.
Nice.
Which is it's a pale ale. So, a lot of people I think have had like a Sierra Nevada or, it's usually just a little bit below an IPA as far as like hops go. But this is an English style pale ale. So there's a lot more malt to this than what you get in a like traditional American pale ale. You still have that hop bitterness, but it's a little more well balanced. And this is a really good example of the style. Like you get I talk about it a lot, like the toasted malt and the caramel flavors with a little bit of the hop bitterness at the end, but definitely it's not the hop punch you get from a normal pale ale. So very good, in the later summer months and even into the fall. And, it only comes at about 5% alcohol. So you can take like a 12-pack of these out on the boat and do some fishing and then, still feel confident that you can drive that boat around.
Oh, that reminds me, Joe. I got a great email for you for later.
Oh, I can't wait.
I haven't pulled any of my emails, but... They're there.
Yeah, I mean, Arcadia puts out some really good beers if you can find their stuff, and I think they distribute pretty far. I know I used to get it back in Jersey, so at least on the East Coast and the Midwest. ArcadiaAles.com is their website, and check them out if you can.
Love it. Thank you for that, Joe.
Yeah.
It is
Thank you.
time. Let us discuss the movie that is called Squirm.
This is it, Jennifer. Your big break in TV. From the prime time, bitch. Main feature.
And we're back.
Yay.
Casey,
Yo.
take me on a trip back into your childhood or whenever it was you discovered this movie and explain to me the impetus behind choosing it for your staff pick.
All right. So I'll be full frontal here. I'd never seen this movie before this episode, and I sat down to watch it for tonight. So that's exciting. But I've been watching the cover of this movie ever since I was probably like 12 years old at the video store in my little small town growing up. It's a box. The original box in the case was pretty effective, which after watching the movie, we find out it's a scene where Roger takes his demise, is on the cover. It was one that always rattled me a lot when I was a youngin' and going through reading boxes. Was never brave enough to pick it up. I've never been particularly scared of worms, but the idea of that many of them in mass, I guess, kind of grossed me out. I used to look at that all the time. Never got brave enough to rent it. Years later, married, moved to Indianapolis, and I'm in my favorite DVD store one day at lunch, and I see that they are renting the movie on DVD shortly after it came out on DVD. And I remember picking it up, and they had the whole wave of nostalgia. It's like, oh, I remember looking at this forever. Still never rented it. I got around to it.
I don't know if it was the one about Blue Underground, I think, did like a huge special edition on this movie.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah, and that one was fairly recent, but it still didn't hit DVD until like 2009 or something like that.
Oh, Shout
Or
Factory.
2008.
Shout Factory did a. Oh, maybe that was.
Yeah.
That was
It
the
was
Blu-
one of
that
the
was the
boutique
Blu-ray.
ones.
Sorry, continue.
But anyways, that one, so that's one that I've always looked at. The cover has always intrigued me. It always, kind of freaked me out. Never got around to watching it or never got brave enough to sit down and watch it. So we came around this time and Mark was talking about watching Faces of Death because he'd always heard about it, never seen it. That's when it popped in my head was, I'd never watched Squirm. I think now's a good time. So here we are.
Wait, so you had never seen it?
No,
Oh,
not at all.
I didn't realize
Because
that.
I did not know, because when we started talking about where to watch the movie and everything, you had mentioned, it's like, well, there's an MST3K episode.
Yeah.
I could probably, or no, you said that you would watch it only if you could watch the MST3K version. I didn't even know that this was on MST3K, which blows my mind because I was a pretty big geek for MST3K. Never knew it was on there.
A lot of those are on YouTube at this point. You should
This
check
one
it
is.
out.
I definitely saw it when I was looking for this.
Not
This
YouTube.
movie's on YouTube. If
I
anyone's
mean,
looking.
Netflix. But yeah, either way, like you should check it out. It's really goddamn funny.
Days.
Did you?
Yeah, it's definitely on my list now after having seen the movie for real. So.
Did you mention any of Jeff Lieberman's other
Not
films?
coming up. I didn't even pay attention to that guy. I didn't know anything about Jeff Lieberman growing up. I was back there looking at it yesterday when I started watching the movie. I was doing a little bit of research and looking at who directed this, and I was surprised to see that Jeff Lieberman was the director of Just Before Dawn, which is pretty big around here.
Yeah, so he did
show.
this. He only has 11 directing titles. He did Squirm, it was his second film. His next film was Blue Sunshine, which is another kind of cult flick. Then in '81, he did Just Before Dawn, which we reviewed on the show way back in the day. And I'm not really familiar with this other stuff. I remember when Satan's Little Helper came out, although I never saw it. That was 2004. And the last thing he directed was in 2006. So I mean, he might even be retired. He's probably he was born in 1947. So, So yeah, this is a super interesting pick. Do you want to tell us kind of how you felt about it in this first watch?
So I was expecting the worst going into this. I mean, it doesn't have. It's got a 4.6 rating on IMDb, but I am also known to like bad movies, B movies, things like that. I wasn't really sure what to expect, but I did not expect greatness, because usually those things that you hype up in your brain over the years do not live up to the hype.
Yeah.
I got to the end of this movie and I kind of liked it. It was kind of fun. There was a little bit of nostalgia just because I built up this mystique around it, but going through it, there's the movie's got problems. I mean, you can't argue that. The movie's too long, it's too slow in parts. There's definitely issues, but
It's about killer worms.
yes, it's about killer worms. But when it hits some pretty strong B movie strides, which gives it a kind of a charm.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Joe?
I had actually seen this a handful of times when I was a kid because it was a pretty big staple on, I don't remember which channel, but one of the local channels in upstate New York. Like, Saturday and Sunday afternoons, they would run these like crappy horror movies. So I had seen this
funny. I wanted to butt in there real quick because I was reading something about the history of this movie, and I don't know if it was New York or not, but they were talking about that there is some city that would play it after there's some local professional.
Oh, it was
baseball
Atlanta
team.
after the Braves games. Yeah,
they play it after the Braves games.
And I think they offered up, I forget what, like some sort of prize if people actually stayed up to watch it and sent in reviews, and I think they got like 200 or 300 reviews like mailed in.
Huh.
Oh yeah, I was reading about that too, because the sportscaster that was calling the game, thinking nobody would watch it, said, "Hey, if you manage to stay up, write a review and call it and send it in to us. I'll send you an autographed baseball."
Wow.
They were surprised they got like a 400 reviews in.
But I mean, I had seen it a handful of times. I didn't remember much other than sort of the big scenes with like giant piles of worms falling. I mean, and we talked about it over email. The only thing I remember is kind of finding it boring as a kid, because it is, and I'm sure we'll talk about it more, like it's an hour and like 34 minutes, and really you don't get a lot of like quote unquote action until about like the hour and 10-minute mark, with the exception of like a couple random things. So it's really, you kind of have to wait for the payoff, but I think watching it now that I'm older, I can appreciate the like sort of charm of it. Like specifically, it is, like you said at the top of the show, Eric, it is super country, like backwoods.
Well, I don't think Jeff Lieberman is like from the South. I have to imagine it's kind of like, it's the type of film that you would expect a dude who lived in like 1970s New York to make about the South. Like
exactly
the most ridiculous characters you could. Yeah, he was born in Brooklyn, New York.
Yeah.
So
I think I joked about it over email that like the main characters all have like ridiculous Southern accents, and it sounds like the direction was like, give me Gone with the Wind, but with a slight learning disability.
Yes.
And like that's what they have. So I can kind of appreciate it. Like it's sort of it's fun in that way now. And the stuff with the worms is super creepy. I actually think I would like to rent this on DVD, and I would love to hear like the audio commentary of like how they did all this, because at the end of the day, like, and I think there's some of, they talk about it a little bit on the Wikipedia page or on IMDb, like there's thousands and thousands of worms. So like the logistics of dealing with
you
that,
might
like,
say there's 100,000 worms.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I think it actually said on Wikipedia that they like depleted the worm supply in Georgia for that year, just because there was so much going on. But I mean, there's like parts where there's just like huge piles of them. So, to me, it would be super interesting to hear like how they dealt with that, or even like how do you clean that up at the end of the day? Like, no idea. But I agree with Casey. It turns out to be pretty fun. There's obviously logistical problems where these are worms. Why can't you just run away from them? But you kind of have to look past that because what this movie is, and if you can do that, I think it's pretty fun.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say that there was a point or two at the end of this movie when all the chaos is going on that I was actually laughing out loud and clapping a little bit, just because it was that fun to see what they were pulling off with these worms.
Yeah, I wasn't totally sure what to expect. I have seen this before, but like I said, only in the MST3K form. And it's kind of an incredible Mystery Science Theater movie because there's a lot of weird, awkward pauses, which is like, and like slow conversations with like, little breaks in them that are the perfect places to like insert dumb jokes. And there's this great running gag throughout the Mystery Science Theater thing about the main the main actress and how she weighs like 80 pounds and has this like insanely like frizzy, like bright fire engine red hair. So you know, like they're like, oh look, it's a swizzle stick with some fuzz on top, and like every time she comes on screen, it's like another joke. So it's like I have a lot of fond memories of that, and I was a little unsure about watching it without it. The biggest surprise to me was that there is a real camp value to this movie that I was able to enjoy. Like, I was able to enjoy it by myself. I know a lot of times I'll say, like, oh, if I could have watched this with, like, Mark or something, I would have really enjoyed it. But I didn't really need anybody with this movie. I was laughing out loud myself a lot. I would contest the idea that there's anything in here that's, like, creepy, but I could 100% see why this movie would freak a kid out. Because it's just really disgusting. I think that it does take a little long to get to the worm action. It is kind of interesting to see how they do the special effects, but there's an underlying thing that makes this movie hilarious, and that's that worms aren't fucking scary because they're fucking worms and they're on the ground and they can't move. So they have this fundamental thing they have to tackle here where you can show big giant globs of worms, like, okay, great. You can show close-ups of worms and their little butthole teeth and like doing that disgusting like I'm not even gonna say what it looks like. But the problem is that they're worms. They're worms and they're on the ground. So like you can't really show them attacking somebody, right? And so all they do is sort of show the blob of worms, then they show the close up, and then they show somebody scream, and then they cut away from it. And you're like, what? Like, but that, because of the wrapped up with the rest of the film, it's hilarious. Like they have this hilarious problem that their antagonist is not scary, and so they have to cook up all these weird, because they don't have a lot of money obviously either, so they have to cook all these weird visual gags to try to kind of like the stupid, like the worms coming out of the faucet and then somehow reversing and going back in.
Yeah, when she turns the water off.
Like, right, like that doesn't make, you know, so, but it's...
Or they milked that skeleton that they had. Like, they obviously had one, and like, now it's in the truck. And somebody else.
Yeah, the skeleton was like half the movie, like chasing that stupid skeleton around. And like, at some point, it kind of turns into an episode of Scooby-Doo, where the two of them are just running around the town trying to... discover like what's going on and doing really weird sleuthy stuff that I couldn't make a lick of sense out of anything that they were talking about. But it's really funny, and even though there's not a lot of worm action, like you jump from scene to scene pretty quick, so at least there's always kind of something else coming along, you know what I mean?
And
it definitely moves. I agree.
It definitely moves, and they pack it with some pretty interesting characters as far as cheap horror movie goes.
Dude,
not interesting necessarily in a good way, but they're hilarious.
The sister is like my new favorite character in like all of film.
She's great.
Yeah.
I mean, I honestly think I could watch a movie about these people in a town without like killer worms. Like, I would still find it entertaining.
The sister, legit, like we were talking about Gummo last week. I was legitimately like, that could be a real person in Gummo. Like,
oh yeah, she was definitely someone's mother in that movie.
I'd like to see this town be the actual setting for this new revamp of Twin Peaks. I think it'd be perfect.
Or even like the sheriff just like immediately hates the guy from New York because he's from New York. Like, he finds a worm in his drink and the sheriff is like, why'd you go and do that?
Well, and it's hilarious too. Like that whole scene is a great example of how the tone is all over the place. Like the sheriff is getting up in his face. There's no, you know, comical music to suggest to you that you shouldn't be taking the sheriff seriously. And he like literally tells him, if I see you again, I'm going to like maim you. Like he basically tells him, I'm going to beat you until you can't leave on your own will or whatever. And then he walks away and they're like cracking a joke and giggling at each other, like at his expense. Like it's hilarious. And I'm like, oh, that was not what I got from that scene, that we don't take him seriously. That was actually kind of scary when he was like, I'm going to fucking kill you.
Yeah.
In their defense, though, he was threatening him, and he's like, "Hey, you won't even have. If I see you again, I'm gonna put it into you, and you won't even have time to call the city police because the phones are down anyways."
yeah, exactly. It's like, because logistically, it's not possible.
Actually, Joe, I really want you to narrate for me the best scene in the movie, which is that we've been alluding to, which is the whole worm farm caper. So explain to me these characters and what they do.
So there's the father and then this guy Roger, right? And Roger is like He's somewhere between like Lenny from Of Mice and Men.
He is the most Cletus ass dude
Oh my
you
lord!
could
And
imagine.
he's just like it's weird because it starts at the beginning of the movie where he's like looking in the window while the woman's changing, but then like you're kind of like, well, maybe he's just simple folk.
But it also, she seemed like a little like, okay, like I don't know, she didn't seem that put
That's
off by it.
him.
She was definitely using her charms against Roger.
Her feminine wiles.
Well, it's weird. I'm sorry, we're gonna jump around now, but like later in the film, she talks about how like Roger had this surprise for her out on the boat, which what we discover was like pretty much him forcing himself on her. But then she's kind of like, well, maybe he was gonna show me the worms or like something. It's like she starts making excuses for him.
It was really weird.
She's like, it wasn't that bad.
It was really weird, and I think it's maybe her acting style, but she was kind of giving like sex eyes to every male character she interacted with. So even that thing with Roger when they're on the lake, it's like there's a weird moment where you think she's totally going to just start making out with him.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
And then it turns and it's like, oh no, this isn't okay. But it's like
sounds like we're like creepy men, but like you're absolutely right.
It was just a weird acting thing where I think what they were trying to portray didn't really come through because of how confusing her acting was.
Yeah. And she's not like the if you look at the cast list, like Roger and Jerry's sister, that we had the awesome sister we were talking about. This is the only thing they've ever been in, but she's got a few movies under her belt, so it's not like she was new at this. So maybe she just wasn't really good at it.
Well, I mean, so the father, Willie Grimes, which is Roger's dad, I gotta look him up to see if like he's ever done anything else. Because I did read that no, this is his only credit. So I've got to imagine he was actually town folk. Because I read that a lot of the people in this movie, with the exception of like the main actors, were just people that lived in that town.
Like I would 100% buy that.
Yeah, even like the people at the diner were just like, y'all come from out of town, big New York City.
Oh my god, the whole
New
scene.
York City.
We'll get back to the worms, but like the whole scene where he goes to the luncheonette, and which like only in the South would you have a luncheonette, and there he orders. Okay, in this really bizarre scene, he orders an egg cream, which I have now learned is seltzer water. Or is it club soda? Like, no, probably seltzer. And like a shot of milk and then chocolate syrup. And I guess it's like kind of like a fizzy ice cream float without the ice cream or something.
It's like a fizzy chocolate milk.
There's neither egg nor cream in it.
No.
It looks like dirty water.
But he orders it, and the waitress is like, what's an egg cream? And he's like, oh, like as simple country folk. So he explains it to her, and she's like, oh, okay. And then... But he says the word egg cream probably 15 times in
100 times, and then like 15 minutes later, he says it like 8 or 9 more times, like when he's trying to explain to it. And then like Jerry's like, "What's an egg cream?" It's just over and over again.
No, and then no wait, isn't that where the sheriff?
Egg cream.
Isn't that where the sheriff comes in though? And then and then he's
he
like, "Oh,
finds
he's probably from the city," or the waitress says that or something like that.
Yeah, like he finds a worm in his drink, and the entire town immediately turns on him. Like, this obviously is something you did.
Yeah. Let's not forget, though, the first part of the scene that cracked me up is when we get introduced to the sheriff in this diner right before Mick walks in. And you see in these movies, small country towns, and the sheriff and everybody's always flirting with the waitress, and they might crack her on the ass as she walks by. No, he had his hand up her skirt, playing with her butt.
My favorite joke over email from this pre-show discussion was Joe saying that the most unbelievable thing about this movie is that they have an Italian restaurant in that town.
Like later, and it was obviously just a setup to have a worm in spaghetti.
Yeah.
But like they're in like this fancy Italian restaurant. It's like, no, you're not.
Meanwhile, the exterior shot looked like an abandoned gas station.
Yeah, it's like an old shack, and meanwhile we're supposed to leave that like Giuseppe's in the back making chicken parm for the townspeople.
Yeah, and not to mention the fact that the sheriff that was just groping you openly in the public in the diner is going to take you out for a fancy Italian dinner. I don't think so.
Wow, then he's going to take you back to the jail cell and do you 6 ways for Sunday.
Oh boy, Joe, tell me about this worm farm.
Oh my god, I love it. So they live next to the worm farm or something? Pretty much Roger.
I mean, Joe, isn't a worm farm really anywhere there's dirt?
It's just a field. I got worms. But so what do they? They borrow the truck, and this is where the worms are starting to escape and everything. And then they discover. I don't know specifically what you're looking for from me for this worm farm thing.
I want you to describe just what happens. Just tell me what happens in the scene because it's funny. I don't know.
So Roger lets Jerry borrow the cart to go pick up Mick. And then they come back.
Jerry's our lady heroine.
Female lead, yeah.
Yeah.
And Mick is the gentleman from New York City who's coming down because they met at some sort of antiques like swap meet.
Yeah. Apparently, Fly Creek, Alabama Fly Creek, Georgia is a hotbed of antiquing.
It was a hotbed in the late 70s. So she borrows the worm farmer's truck, which happens to be fully loaded with worms.
Full of worms.
What did we say, like 100,000
100,000 worms.
They come back and, you hear Roger's father, like, berating him in the most, like, backwoods. Like,
yeah, backwoods, yeah.
Boy.
Where all them worms go, boy?
Boy!
And then poor Roger, like, it just starts to make me sad because he's just, like, beaten down and, like, he hates worms now. And, like, there's this whole ridiculous
But also, like, to your point about how everyone in this movie seems slow, like, he gets mad at the girl in this way that a little kid and or a slow person would.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I'm never letting you borrow my daddy's truck again. He's, like, crying and punching things.
Never let you borrow this here truck gift from me no more, man. And then Jerry's just like, I'm real sorry, Raj. And he's like, all right, maybe we'll go fishing later and catch a fish.
Oh, my God.
It's so like sad. And then he's like down at the bar later drinking his Pabst Blue Ribbon, which I have to imagine was some sort of like product placement because he was like holding the can like right at the camera. Yeah. And he's just like, he's all giddy that they're gonna go fishing.
I got a surprise for you, Jerry.
So it's just this really, like, to me, one of the funniest scenes in the movie where it took me so, like, 2 scenes later, I was still trying to figure out exactly what these people were talking about, but he says, like, where he tells them the worms he's like, there were 100,000 worms in there, and he's screaming at the kid.
You done lost me $300, boy.
And that to which led Joe to observe over email that, like, worm farming doesn't seem like a very lucrative business.
Oh, that was me.
Yeah,
that's like that doesn't. I don't know that provides a livable wage.
Like, how long would it take you to get 100,000 worms?
God
well,
knows,
from what we saw from watching the movie, all you need is a little electricity, and you can farm 100,000 worms easy.
100,000.
I think they were turning a profit after the storm.
What I couldn't piece together is they talk about how they actually farm worms. So I couldn't tell if he already had a whole field of worms, and these were ones that he had actually ordered to put in the field to add to what he already has and start,
Joe, it's apparent to me that I'm not really familiar with the intricacies of worm farming.
It's interesting. I could watch a like Discovery Channel show on this.
I guess I never. Apparently, I never in my life even considered where like worms came from.
What's funny though is I got curious because they show us these worms very close up in the front, show their little pinchers and stuff coming out. Obviously, real worms. You go out and look at IMDb in their trivia section, and they were real worms. There's some kind of sea worm called a glycerna or something to that sort. Yeah. I'm trying to find it here, but it's eluding me. But I went and looked up those worms. Yeah, it's a glycera worm. I went and looked those up in Wikipedia, and they actually talk about how farming these worms up and down the East Coast is actually a fairly big industry.
I know I used to go to the Wiggly Worm in Burnt Hills, New York.
It's really funny. They talk about how like, she tells them how the worms there are different. And it's like everybody in the town knows about the worms and how they've got teeth and shit. And like, I just thought that was really funny.
She never saw them broke the skin before, Eric.
If the worms in your area, like, bite you and attack, why would you make that your business? Like, why not just get worms from the town over where they don't murder you?
Yeah.
Like, maybe work on that.
I have always done well fishing with, like, night crawlers. I've never needed a worm with teeth.
I caught a fish with some cheese once. We're talking about country. Apparently that's a thing.
Did you guys happen to look up the main actor, Mick? Carl Deghart, I think is his name.
He
No,
reminded
that's
me-
the guy who plays the father.
Maybe it's a whole New York thing, but he kind of reminded me of like if a Seinfeld character had visited the woods.
His
Little
name
bit.
is Don Scardino. He's actually directed like a ton of TV,
Really?
like 30 Rock, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt.
No
like,
shit.
Yeah, like
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Two Broke Girls, a bunch of Rescue Me, like all these shows you've heard of.
I kind of love him in this movie. Like I
I
yeah.
think he's great.
kind of the only normal person, and his reactions to everything around him are just so funny.
I just kept
Very
thinking about
endearing.
like because he directed a ton of 30 Rock, and I just would love to see like what happened on the set of that show when they discovered that the director was the main actor in Squirm.
Yeah. He directed the incredible Burt Wonderstone.
Oh yeah.
I'm not familiar with that.
That's a Jim Carrey magician movie with him and Steve Carell.
Was it Jim Carrey or was it
Jim Carrey is one of them.
look at that. Steve Carell, Chris Bender.
Any other scenes like in this watch through that stuck out to you guys?
I really enjoyed this so part of the trivia talks about how these Glycera worms, they were trucking them in for this movie because, as we said earlier, there's scenes in this movie when obviously there's a whole bunch of rubber noodles or hoses or something that are devouring these people. That's not even hidden. I don't think they even tried to hide the fact. But at the same time, if you look at the trivia out here, they talked about they were trucking in like shipments of 250,000 of these worms at a time.
Yeah.
And it says, as Joe had alluded to earlier, they talked about how this production of this movie would end up wiping out New England's supply of these fishing worms that year. But they did some pretty big stuff in there. So there was a time, and I don't even remember who it was, that they found his body somewhere in the woods. They went and opened his shirt, and there was the worms falling.
That was the
falling
father.
from
It was Roger's father.
Yeah, I thought he was the skeleton, but that may have been a different scene. But that was really effective because even as an adult, you look at it, it's like, oh shit, that's gross. I haven't seen that before.
Yeah.
It was definitely Roger's father because this is his one movie credit, and
Yeah.
that picture of him buried in the ground is his IMDb profile picture.
Oh
And
yeah.
somewhere I thought I read that Rick Baker did the effects.
There's no way.
That he did some of the effects, at least that was in the trivia or somewhere. But some of those effects, like the effects that they did on Roger when these worms started attacking him and started crawling under his skin on his face, they were pretty good. You could see the shit moving under his skin.
Yeah, well, that's the classic like it's called like a bladder where they've got like a kind of rubber. They put the underneath prosthetic skin. They've got like these thin rubber hoses that are almost like balloons, sort of. And then probably behind them or something, you attach like an air pump so that when you pump air in, it blows up, but it looks like something's like burrowing under your skin. It's like a lot of the effects in the Thing were done that way with like tentacles and stuff.
What I didn't understand was how the worms, like everybody else, like they ate the skeleton, they ate everything. Why Roger did they just like slightly embed in his skin?
He
and then
became
hang
like
out?
he became like the Worm King. I mean, it's
Yeah.
really that's like it illustrates what I was talking about though, with like the hilarious ineffectiveness of the worms. Of like the only way
exactly.
Roger's attacked is he has to be pushed over face first into them because they can't actually attack him.
Yeah. He had to fall into the
Like
boat.
never once is there really a scene in this movie where like the worms never like lunge themselves at somebody.
Yeah.
Even though it's teased, they never really like fall out of the sky onto somebody in any kind of effective way.
No, they just pretty much fall like, you open a door, there's a giant pile of them.
Yeah.
But they make, and Casey, you had to sort of translate this, but the movie, I guess we can talk about the end. Like, it doesn't really have an ending. It just they talk about a lot in the movie how light, these worms, crawl back in the ground or hide because they don't like light. So the movie just kind of wraps up with the next day. The sun comes up and like that's it. And they had this power guy out because there was the whole thing. I don't think we talked about it. Like the thing that sparked this entire thing was there was a big storm that knocked down one of the power lines and sort of electrocuted all these worms out of the ground to start attacking people. So the sun comes up and they imply, because there's this service repair guy there that says that they've restored power, and he implies that just everybody in the town is dead. So not one person in Fly Creek could escape these worms just by say walking away.
Well, to be fair, I don't think the phone guy knew everybody was dead, because what I had to translate was because when he woke them up, they woke up in a tree after they crawled out the window the night before, escaping from all the giant masses of worms. And he said, "Strangest thing, power's back up and ain't nobody answering their dang phones."
Yeah, the movie just kind of ends. It's like,
I rewound
what?
that clip no less than 4 times and still didn't understand what that man was gibbering.
Yeah.
It just all I heard was "darnest thing, power back again."
The version I watched on YouTube had Greek subtitles, which was a fun twist.
That's what I like too. So now I know Greek.
Nice.
Yep. It's a movie.
Apparently, there's no Greek translation for egg cream, though, as I discovered.
There's some interesting bits I was reading about this on. If you look at the Wikipedia and stuff, this movie originally had an R rating when it was when they first finished it, and then they went through and recut a PG rating, and that's what you see out on a lot of the theatrical stuff and what they played on the TV and everything.
Well, this was the era too where there was no PG-13, so there was a weird gulf between the two.
I mean, really, all you would have to do to make this PG would be like cut out. There's like 2 small clips of nudity. I feel like you cut that out and you pretty much got it.
Side boob.
Yeah. And I think they cut down, from what I was reading, it says that they cut down some of the gore bits with the worms and stuff. So probably some of your worm, Roger's facial effects and stuff probably got trimmed back a bit, I would guess.
And the sister smokes a lot of weed.
Yeah, she does.
Although it was the 70s. It was the 70s, so that probably wouldn't get you in.
That was nice that she found rolling papers that matched the color of her teeth.
She's just great. I really can't overstate how much I liked her in this movie.
That would crack me up too, because there was at one point, once they realized that all the worms are coming out and they're killing all the people, and they run back home to hide, and they lock all the doors and shit, and then they throughout this whole movie, we've seen Jerry, our main gal, change clothes like 6 times. And we assume that a couple days have gone by. The sister is still in the same clothes, and there's no way she looks like she's been bathing regularly or anything like that. And all of a sudden, she's like, "I gotta take a shower. I gotta take a shower now."
What I really like about the sister is that she is ostensibly in the movie, but she doesn't seem to be really like experiencing anything that's happening in the movie. She's just kind of there. Like you keep forgetting about her, and then she just pops up, and she's like, "Hey, what are y'all doing?" And then it's like they get high, and then they just move on to the next scene, and she's gone again. And that's kind of why she's an amazing character.
She's kind of great, yeah.
And she kind of knows what everybody in town's up to.
Definitely in Gummo, in like the background of a scene, I'm sure of it.
She serves the spaghetti.
Spaghetti.
Talking about that lead up to the shower discussion, though, also made me remember the scene the most what the fuck scene that caught me off guard throughout this movie is when they lock themselves in the house. They're hiding from the worms. They're not telling their mom what happened. They're all sitting in the house, no power, and the fucking tree falls on the house and destroys half of it out of nowhere.
Well, here's the best part. They 100% destroyed that house with that tree.
I know.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That completely baffled me. Like, all hell's breaking loose. There's worms killing everyone, but they don't want to like alarm the mother, so they just sit down for a meal.
Doesn't it also seem like the mother's gonna reveal herself to be like the queen of the worms at some point? Doesn't she seem like she's got some weird thing going on that she's not telling you?
I thought she was awfully thirsty, which makes, I mean, she's a widow, so they talked about how the girl's dad had died and stuff like that, and Mick was having to wear his clothes that they had in storage. But she's sitting at that table. She's like, "Why don't you go? I thought Roger was going to sit next to me. Well, what about this other guy we haven't talked about the entire movie? I thought he was coming to dinner."
Oh, there's layers to it. I see. I was missing the subtlety in her performance, I guess.
Yeah,
I thought she just seemed like a sweet lady.
100,000
She had a really
worms.
good. Well, I shouldn't say that. She had some acting credits to her too. It looked like she had a couple, like a fairly good-sized film noir flick at some point on her IMDb.
Many layers to Squirm.
Escape in the Desert.
Anything else, guys, or is it time to wrap for this?
I think that might be it.
Yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot else to say.
Squirm, Casey. So is this the last staff pick? No, Schnars hasn't had one, right?
We got Schnars, yeah.
So far it's been the last broadcast. Joe,
we haven't had Joe's yet.
Joe,
yeah,
no,
I did
we had
Tombs
Joe's.
of the Blind Dead.
Tombs of the Blind.
That's right.
Tombs of the Blind Dead. Mark's was We just did Mark.
Faces of Death.
Faces of Death, and then Squirm. This is a really super weird stretch of stuff. But we've been doing this for 10 years, so run out of stuff at some point.
I was a little worried about picking this too, just figured following after Faces of Death. And as much as we beat Mark up over that, I was a little bit worried about this one, but I ended up, it was enjoyable.
Yeah. All right, guys, would you recommend Squirm, Casey?
Yeah.
Joe?
I would go, yeah.
Yeah, if you love B movies, I think there's a lot to like about this. And if you're nervous about like diving in, do the Mystery Science Theater one.
Yeah.
Hedge your bets a little, All right, guys, that's going to do it for Squirm. Time for some fan mail.
Warning. What you will see in the movie Pieces cannot be revealed, cannot be described, cannot even be imagined. And you don't have to go to Texas for a chainsaw massacre. Pieces. It's exactly what you think it is. Pieces. Absolutely no one under 17 will be admitted.
This is Jason Mewes, and you're listening to BloodyGoodHorror.com. Yes.
Send your emails to info@bloodygoodhorror.com or hit us up on Twitter at BGHorror with the hashtag AskBGH. And don't forget to pick up back episodes of the show at podcast.bloodygoodhorror.com.
And we are back. We are back. We should say, I don't want to bring the show down, guys, but R.I.P. George Romero.
Yeah.
It's not really, the guy died, that's unfortunate, but he was an old dude. He lived a super full life. He got to make movies he loved, and he was still making movies, like, right up until the end. So I think, it's a good story.
Yeah, he did his thing.
Yeah. I know that Mark was working on a little write-up on the site where he got a bunch of the writers together. I'm looking right now. It's not up yet, so he may have to jump in and do some editing, but that should be up on the site soon. I wouldn't want to upset Mark by not telling people about the website, right, Joe?
It's a thing. It's out on the internet. BloodyGoodHorror.com.
All right. Full disclosure here. My email inbox is a GD nightmare and needs the yearly pruning, but I believe I have most of the emails, so let's go from there. Let's see. July 15th. Okay. Sam says, hey all, wanted to write in to ask if any of you are following the Petscop channel on YouTube. The premise is, this is great because Joe's literally not going to understand a word in this email, and I love it.
I'm already lost.
Casey's with me. I haven't seen this, but I understand what he's talking about. The premise is a mix between a found footage Let's Play and a standard spooky game creepypasta. But it's particularly well done and technically interesting because it's unclear whether the videos are animation or if the producer's actually coding a PS1 game as they go along. Anyway, with all the weird stuff like this on the internet, are you surprised we haven't gotten anything more interesting than The Den, Unfriended, etc.? I feel like if you splice these videos together and release them as an indie flick, it would be an instant cult classic. I may have actually watched what he's talking about, so I'm just going to Google it quick because we got time.
What is this thing called?
Yes, okay, I did see this. So this was a series of videos somebody made where they claimed that they had found some kind of like mystery old PlayStation game that had never been released, and that and then it's like they're exploring it, but it's like an unfinished game, and it's really weird and creepy, and you can go to all these bizarre doors and like babies crying and like, so it's obviously fake, but it's kind of presented as like, oh, I found this creepy thing and I started playing it, guys. Here's the video, and it's actually kind of cool. It's like it's like found footage for the new generation, Joe.
Huh.
So anyway, Marble Hornets is a thing he mentions. That was like one of the OG Slender Man things. Casey, you're familiar with that, right?
Yeah.
It actually like is really cool. Like I've watched through, there's like 100 videos or something in that series, but and I've watched through most of them, and they're actually really creepy. It's been a while, but I really like this stuff, and I like some of the stuff that comes out of like creepypastas. I just can't. I'm too old to follow it, so I need someone else to curate it and then let me know like this. Like I think I saw this story on Kotaku or something. You know what I mean? So like I need an arbiter to say, oh, okay, here's this cool thing. You should check this out.
Well, it's interesting though, how he's talking about that though, because Sci-Fi had this last season had a new show they started called Channel Zero, where they did one story one season was wrapped around one story, and it was all influenced by a creepypasta story about some children's show called Candle Cove. I don't remember the original creepypasta story, and I'm sure it didn't like line up with it directly, but the show itself, they did this whole fictional show. It wasn't found footage or anything, but playing on the idea of this children's show that was haunting people and stuff like that. It was kind of creepy. It was weird. I didn't know where they were going, so it was interesting to watch, but it was good enough too, and what worked well with it in today's age, because we talked about like with Faces of Death, where you watch that movie when we were kids, didn't have the internet to go verify that if it was real or fake, and it's like, so of course you believe it's real. With this, you start talking about it, it's influenced by these creepypastas. You go out as soon as the show's over, you start looking this stuff up, and you actually find nuggets of stuff out there that are scattered around the internet talking about this stuff, where some people think it's real and stuff like that. I think it adds a lot to it. I think we'll see more of that coming.
I think if I was a kid in this era, I could see being way into that stuff, and I think I was the most into it when I first started discovering it, and it's like, it's fake, but also there's that air of mystery of, oh, this is cool. I don't know, maybe. Like there's that infamous story from the fake message board about the guy who was he was going spelunking, and he finds this cavern, and he's digging down deeper and deeper, and then he's doing it in like he'll go for a night and dig with his buddy and his dog, and then he goes home and he blogs about it. He does this for weeks on end. It's like literally like dozens of forum pages. You're reading all his posts about every expedition down there, and then suddenly it just stops, like right after this creepy shit happened. Ted the Caver. That's like the one, and I read it probably, God, almost like maybe not 10 years ago at this point, but pretty close. And that was like one of my first real exposures to like just full on internet fiction, but like created to look like reality. It's like fascinating. That
was
cool.
One of mine too, and it was one of those ones where, like Eric said, it's like, yeah, this is bullshit, but it's interesting. The next thing you know, you spent the last 2 hours at work reading this story that's going on, and it gets to the end, and they leave you hanging, and you're like, whoa,
it's creepy.
You actually got a little bit of a chill.
Yeah, no, that's super creepy. So again, I like that stuff. It's my only issue that I would take with this premise is that like something like this I don't know if it's Petscop or Petscop. This stuff like with this Let's Play and that kind of thing is so esoteric to your average person, even your average like nerd, I think at this point, that it's a little too kind of obscure, but certainly there's a lot of material to be mined from those kinds of stories. Joe, you all right, buddy? You're making a creepypasta face over there.
I started watching a video of Disney animatronics malfunctioning.
Oh, good. There you go. That's a scary internet story.
That could be a creepypasta on its own.
There's one of the Great Movie Ride where one of the munchkins from Wizard of Oz looks like he's jerking off in a window.
Oh, yep.
It's pretty good, guys.
It's like the
they made games off of that, Five Nights at Freddy's, about the animatronics coming to life.
Yeah.
Huh.
There's a great documentary called The Rock of Fire Explosion about
yeah, I was just talking about that.
Kind of weird people who collect those animatronics and keep them alive.
John Stamos, big Disney collector, like has like figures from It's a Small World and stuff in his house. Like,
oh shit.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So a few weeks ago, we got an email from a diver who wanted to school us on 47 meters down. This has now apparently kicked off a new trend at Bloody Good Horror, which is people who listen to the show who are experts in certain fields writing us in to tell us about the things that we're talking about. So
what do I feel like I'm about to get corrected about beer?
I'm not sure that corrected is the word, but it's about beer, Joe. This is from Adam.
Sure.
Adam says, hey, BGH crew, I'm a lawyer in Halifax, Nova Scotia, Canada, and a longtime fan of the show. Eric made a comment about needing a lawyer for Joe after his comments on how much you can drink and drive during last week's Beer Guts for Faces of Death. So I'm putting my name in the running. So get these guys. I'll give you this guy's info, Joe, in case you ever need him.
I appreciate it.
Based on what Joe proposed, drinking 10 beers at 5.5% at a restaurant and then driving home, I did some simple calculations. For a 30-year-old, the average weight of an American man, 196 pounds, and assuming you would only be at the restaurant for between 2 and 3 hours, your blood alcohol content would be between 0.168 and 0.185, which is double the legal limit in Chicago, 0.08, and you would have gross motor impairment, likely stumbling, severe nausea, and be approaching blackout territory.
Wait, did he say 5?
10 beers at 5.5%.
Okay, all right. Now,
which is
now
what.
Where did he say he's a lawyer at? Nova Scotia?
Yeah.
He's obviously never seen the average American in
average
the Midwest.
Joe.
And also, he's doing things in kilometers, not the metric system. Like it's all off. It's all off.
He then goes on to say, assuming this is your first DUI, Chicago has a max jail time of 6 months and a minimum fine of $1,000. If you need me to come to Chicago and defend Joe pro bono someday, please let me know. Thanks for all the great content over the years. Best, Adam.
I think
That's
the
pretty
takeaway
great.
from that is he's concerned about you, Joe, because he's pointing out the
Well,
Chicago law.
Well, I was the one last week who was expressed concern about liability over Joe's beer drinking advice, but you know.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's a valid.
That's why we have an LLC, Joe. So you can't sue me. You sue the company, and I guess who runs the company? His name starts with John and ends with Schnars.
Imagine John going to jail. He ends up on Rikers Island because of this goddamn podcast. Because some idiot's babbling beer. Like, you drink 40 of these and still pick your kids up.
Yep, pretty much. info@bloodygoodhorror.com is the email address. That's all we got, unless I missed it, which is possible. We're also on Twitter @BGHorror. Joe, bring us home.
We got a couple. We use 2 different hashtags on the Twitters. First one is BGH Classics, which if you're a patron subscriber or you just happen to be listening to an old episode and find something that tickles your fancy and think is funny, you can tweet us with @BGH Classics. Or sorry, the hashtag BGH Classics. We got 2 this week. First up from @JHAR0. And this is apparently a quote I did in a Jewish sounding Yuri, like a Yiddish Yuri voice. You are not going to get me again, Hitler. And that was World War Z, episode 254.
Wow. World War Z. What was going on in World War Z?
That was the one with Brad Pitt.
Is Brad Pitt Jewish in that movie?
I have no idea why this would be. But I'm sure. I went through a period where Yuri popped up every episode.
That's true. I mean, it was a good accent, to be fair.
No need to worry. @Claire_quality. And this is one from Eric. Eric reading opening info dump from I Frankenstein. These are Jesus gargoyles. They are gargoyles created by Jesus.
Oh, that movie. Wow, that's one I forgot kind of existed.
That was a thing. That's it for BGH Classics.
Remember, he was Sorry, now I'm just thinking about it. He was Frankenstein, but instead of just being like strong and like he had some weapon. Didn't he have some club or something that he used as his weapon? It's like magical nightstick or some shit.
Yeah, now that I think about it, I believe you're right.
Now I'm gonna look it up.
And then we also use the hashtag AskBGH, where you can send in questions, and we'll obviously read them on the episode. First one from @MadSciencePro. He says, which staff member gets this for a birthday present? And he sent a picture of someone, Taz and Bugs dressed up like crisscross. It's some pillow that somebody left on a curb. So you might want to get your hands on that.
Further, of course, our discussion of Looney Tunes and their respective white trash cache.
Which one is the most white trash? Yeah.
I just want to say that the official Lionsgate site for I Frankenstein refers to them as fighting sticks.
Oh. Clever.
They inflict crushing blows in a flurry of heavy swings.
Only when wielded by Frankenstein.
Right.
Or it's just a stick.
What a movie.
Next up from @PSG Author 1313. Was wondering if any of you have checked out Hell House LLC on Amazon Prime. Hidden found footage gem.
I've not heard
even
of it.
heard of it.
No, me either.
Are you recommending it, or are you just asking if we checked it out? I like to wait for an actual recommendation these days because I've seen some shit.
I think he's asking.
Yeah.
He calls it a hidden gem. So
Yeah.
this guy, he's actually hung out with us a couple times at Horror Hound and whatnot. He's legit. I'll take his word on that.
Cool. Casey just sent a link to Ted the Caver, and which is like on an angelfire.com site, which is amazing. And it's copyright 2001, so it's been around for like 17 years.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
All right, we got a few more here. Next up from @Skizbot. Can you think of any movie moments or plot devices that have made you squirm in your seat?
That's a very, very open-ended question.
Yeah, I mean, for
one
me,
that worked for me because of specific phobias, arachnophobia. I watched it from my friend's kitchen, peeking around the corner.
it's for me like any sort of cutting usually makes me cringe a bit. Like specifically in with like what do they call those? Not syringes, but scalpels.
Yeah.
Like what is in Pet Cemetery? There's that scene where the little kid cuts the father's Achilles tendon, like that.
Yeah.
Like
No,
gets me
isn't
every
it?
time.
Is it the father or is it the
Or no,
old
it's
old neighbor?
yeah. What's his name? Munster.
Yeah, Herman Munster.
Herman Munster. Yeah.
I always get hung up on like with special effects and stuff like that when there's scenes where when you get past the cutting that you're talking about and you get the aftermath where you see like the split in the person's skin. Like the one that stands out to me that always grossed me out was in Nightbreed. The main dude, after he got to Meridian and he had that pattern that opened up on his face, that grossed me out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We did have one more email. Caitlin says, what real obscure movies do you guys remember watching when you were young? I remember today watching Ticks, Monster in the Closet, and Frogs when I literally would rent anything that was PG-13 just so I could watch horror, and my mom couldn't say no. Thanks. Like, Ticks actually was... They used to play Ticks on USA a lot. So my number one pick for this is a movie called Mosquitoes that they would play on USA all the time. That was like just... and it was starred Gunnar Hansen. And it was literally about giant mutant mosquitoes, and they had these really great, I mean, quote unquote great, but like, mosquito puppet things, and this great effect where they would suck all the blood out of your body, and you would just be like desiccated. It's a really terrible movie. I own it on VHS and DVD, and I kind of love it.
We come from a time like with USA and probably a few other channels where just they played this weird random shit, like Joe Bob Briggs Drive-In.
Oh yeah,
like all.
Oh yeah,
these
and
movies,
I
like
think I might have
Squirm.
actually seen it. I might have seen Mosquito on that.
Yeah, like exactly. Like Squirm is a movie that like I stumbled upon. Frankenhooker I remember seeing as a kid. Like there's a ton. And which I don't know. I guess you could say with the internet now, maybe it's easier to stumble upon that stuff, but I think you kind of lose something of being up till like 2 a.m. on a Saturday night and finding some weird random shit.
Yeah, it's kind of like what I'm trying to do by using the Shutter TV a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But oh man, Ticks! I fucking love Ticks. Seth Green and Clint Howard are in Ticks.
Nice.
Oh, wow. We got one other from Skizbot. He says, "Hey, if you were a hot dog and you were starving, would you eat yourself?
Would you eat yourself?
I know I would."
Yeah. It costs roughly a nickel.
It's a simple question. If the moon were made of spare ribs, would you eat it?
Norm. Hey, Norm.
Hey, Norm. You gain weight?
Oh, classic.
Yeah. Next one from @JairBearGutkin. Horror or not, what's the weirdest movie you ever saw?
Oh boy.
Oh, I know.
Weirdest
There's
movie.
one I found at the library after I started doing my horror blog stuff. Let me see if I can find it real quick. It was a foreign flick. It was not Marion Cotillard.
We've watched some weird stuff. Freaked was pretty out there.
Freaked is great, man. That's such a good movie.
Yeah, it's fun, but it's super weird.
Yeah.
I'm not finding it. I wanted to say that the movie was called Little Otik. And it was like some weird, maybe this is it. When a childless couple learn that they cannot have children, it causes great distress. To ease his wife's pain, the man finds a piece of root in a backyard and chops it and varnishes it into the shape of a child. However, the woman takes the root as her baby and starts to pretend that it is real. When the root takes life, they seem to have gained a child, but its appetite is much greater than a regular baby.
Wow. When you said child, you reminded me, honestly, like the weirdest movie I think that we ever done on the show might be Eraserhead, which is I had never seen before and is just like real not okay. You know what a movie is like a mainstream movie, but I don't think it's sometimes easy to forget how weird it is Pee-wee's Big Adventure. Like if you take that movie out of the context, you take it out of the context of knowing what Pee-wee is and you just show that movie to somebody, it's terrifying.
Paging Mr. Herman.
Yeah, I mean the whole nightmare where they're like the clowns are like just like doing surgery on his bike is one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. I really legitimately, and now that I'm thinking about it, that would make a good stat pick someday because I legitimately look at that film as at least partially being a horror movie.
Tell him Large Marge thing.
Yeah, Large Marge.
I haven't seen that
Large
movie in
Marge
years.
is probably the scariest thing that ever happened to me in my childhood.
Well, and it was straight borrowed up from Twilight Zone.
Oh, was that like an homage?
Oh, really?
I would think because I mean the effects was similar.
Casey, this Angel Fire site just popped up a pop-up ad, and then it was like site not found.
Yeah, I've seen it too.
It's pretty funny.
All right, and then last one from @Mprezia. Any thoughts on the Poughkeepsie tapes finally being released by Scream Factory? Eric must be excited for it.
Well, I mean, the overwhelming sentiment that I've seen online is like, cool, I guess I can see it again legally this time. Like, if like anybody who's really into horror has seen it at this point, it's been pretty easy to get a hold of for a long time.
I would say it's cool though for the people that made the, your filmmakers there. That's cool to see it finally get an actual release.
I mean, the real travesty is that if they made that movie nowadays, it never would sit on the shelf that long because there are so many avenues to put those movies out. Like I don't know why it sat on the shelf for so long, and it's the same. Like a similar thing happened with House of a Thousand Corpses. Like that movie was made, the distributor just did not know what to do with it, and it sat on the shelf for like a couple of years. This thing, I can't remember a horror film that's pretty good. Like you could debate whether or not you liked it, but it's a pretty interesting movie. With some of the garbage that gets put out, the idea that they never just put this out on VOD and called it a day or put it on Netflix is pretty insane. So I would bet, even though those guys have gone on to do a lot of other movies and had some success, I would bet that the Dowdle brothers are both pretty, excited that it finally came out.
Yeah.
I tell you what, the thing that's going to drive me over the line to actually buy that on Blu-ray now that it comes out is if they have a special feature about Lunars.
Lunars, yeah.
I think it's one of the most unsettling movies we've ever reviewed on this show.
Yeah, it's got its moments.
Yeah.
It's Bird Mask, the Bird Mask, and he's in the black suit, and he's crawling backwards, but the Bird Mask is turned right, and it's this. When you remember that, he's like coming down the stairs or something when she's in the basement. It's towards the end of the movie.
Yeah,
it's so messed up. And then the whole
I want to go back and rewatch this, but
I kind of do because it's been so long, and I'm sure I don't remember most of it. But I remember being really unsettled by it.
Yeah, I agree. And that is it for the tweets.
Cool. Tweets.
Cool, guys.
Anything else you guys want to talk about? Shoot the breeze. What's going on in Joe World?
It's a ways off, but October 21st, our big BGH Midnight Movie Madness Fun-tastrophe. We're actually probably the next time all of us are on the show, we can announce what the movie's going to be, which will be big news. So look for that in the next couple of weeks.
Oh yeah, that's right. We locked a movie in. We did. We'll wait, I guess, till the next time everybody's on.
It'll be worth the wait.
Good thinking, Joe. Pretty exciting. Though. I was pleased.
So good stuff there, and we pretty much locked in the venue for the little pre-party that we're doing, and we've obviously got the venue for where the movie's going to be. So we'll really have all the details somewhat buttoned up by in the next couple of weeks. So look for that.
All the deets next week. War for the Planet of the Apes.
You betcha.
The trilogy. We bring a close. Our story started with Brian Cox's Monkey Jail and ends with Woody Harrelson shaving his head and being a weird white supremacist man.
Indeed.
As we all saw it coming.
It's all coming full circle. And don't forget,
I was gonna say after War of the Planet of the Apes, we'll probably be getting to John's staff pick, unless Wish Upon still happens to be in the theater, and then we are in the movie theater for a couple weeks after that, starting out in August.
Oh,
nice. And don't forget to keep an eye on the site for a little tribute to one Mr. George Romero that Mark is cooking up. That's going to do it for this show. Hope you enjoyed our review of Casey's staff pick, Squirm, and we'll talk to you next week.
oh, bye, I guess.
Bye-bye.